Ever heard of pagers being used as weapons of war?
Yeah.
It sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're talking Hezbollah, Israel, Iran, a whole geopolitical mess, and how something as outdated as a pager managed to become a deadly weapon in their conflict. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's make sure everyone's got the players straight. Hezbollah, they're a powerful force in Lebanon, right? Political muscle, military might, the whole deal.
Right, they're a major player, and they've got Iran backing them up.
Exactly. Iran, of major power in the region, always stirring the pot. And then, of course, you've got Israel on the other side with their advanced military and history in the region. It's a recipe for, well, disaster, isn't it?
Mhm.
Especially when you throw tech into the mix.
Oh, absolutely. This whole thing just goes to show how vital communications are in modern warfare.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can cut off your enemy's ability to talk to each other, to coordinate, it's just as good as any bomb. Throws everything into chaos, gives you the upper hand.
And that brings us to the pager bombing itself. Hezbollah, they switched to pagers, thinking it was this secure way to communicate. But then, boom, these things start blowing up. Thousands injured, children included. It's horrific. And what's truly messed up is that these pagers, they were designed to beep like crazy before exploding, almost like they wanted to draw attention,
Yeah.
maximize the terror. What do you make of that? I mean, are we talking about a whole new level of warfare here?
Honestly, it's the kind of thing that makes even seasoned analysts like myself take a step back. It's a chilling reminder of how quickly the nature of conflict can change. This wasn't just about taking out the enemy. It was about striking fear into the hearts of everyone. That psychological impact, that waiting for the beat that means you're about to be blown up. It's a whole other level of cruelty.
It's like something straight out of a nightmare. And a lot of experts are saying this kind of tactic, it points to a new era of asymmetrical warfare, where groups with fewer resources can strike back against much stronger opponents using these unconventional methods. Kind of makes you wonder where we go from here.
And what's really fascinating is that this pager bombing, it wasn't just some isolated incident. It feeds into a larger pattern as how Israel uses technology in conflict. It's like this concept analysts are calling the Palestine laboratory.
The Palestine laboratory, I've heard the term, but I think a lot of our listeners might be scratching their heads. Could you break that down for us?
Yeah, so the Palestine laboratory, it's a pretty loaded term. Basically, some analysts argue that Israel uses the occupied territories as this testing ground for their newest military tech, their tactics. They get to see how this stuff plays out in a real conflict against both civilians and, well, militant groups, gather data, refine their methods, stuff they couldn't really get away with anywhere else.
So they're using a war zone as a live fire testing lab. It's
Oh,
pretty disturbing when you think about it.
exactly. And this pager bombing, as crazy as it sounds, it fits right into that pattern, pushing the boundaries of warfare technologically and psychologically.
And the fallout from that incident, it's been, well, explosive, to say the least.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the assassination of that Hamas leader, the Iranian ambassador, getting caught in the bombing itself, the retaliatory strikes. It just feels like it's spiraling.
Yeah, it's a textbook example of what we call a war of attrition. Each side trying to grind the other down, constant pressure, constant attacks.
But what's the end game here? I mean, they're both digging in, but to what end?
It's about more than just land or who has the bigger guns. Israel, with their military superiority, they probably want to cripple Hezbollah, make it impossible for them to function, let alone attack, make the cost of resistance too high.
And Hezbollah, Hamas, they know they can't match Israel's firepower head on. So what's their strategy?
It's a different kind of calculation. They want to make the occupation both politically and in terms of how the world sees Israel unbearable, damage their international standing, force them to the negotiating table.
So both sides are locked in this struggle, trying to break the other's will. It's a terrifying game of chicken with incredibly high stakes.
And the people caught in the middle, the civilians, they're the ones who suffer most. This drop site news report, it really brings that home. Did you have a chance to read about the situation in Gaza?
I did, and I have to say, it's been weighing on me. 2 babies every single day. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the human cost of all this. It's easy to get caught up in the strategy and the geopolitics, but at the end of the day, it's people who are paying the price. Families torn apart, a whole generation growing up in the shadow of conflict.
It's a tragedy, and it makes you wonder, is there any way out of this cycle of violence? Can these deep wounds ever truly heal?
It's the question, isn't it? So after all of this, after diving deep into this pager bombing and the Palestine laboratory and this war of attrition, what are the key takeaways you think our listeners should really remember?
This pager bombing, it might seem like something out of a spy novel, but it's a sign of things to come. The battlefields of the future, they're not just going to be about tanks and troops. Technology, cyber warfare tactics that blur the lines between who's a combatant and who's not, that's what we're facing.
It's like we're stepping into a dystopian sci-fi film, except it's real life. And that
Mhm.
Palestine laboratory idea, it just adds another layer of unease to it all.
Exactly. We can't afford to be naive about this. We have to understand these evolving threats. And not just from a military perspective, we have to think about the human impact, the ethical implications, all of it.
Because as we've been discussing, the human cost is staggering. Those 2 babies dying every day in Gaza. That's not just a statistic, that's a gut punch. And it highlights just how desperate the need for peace is.
Absolutely. We can analyze the players, their motives, their strategies, but we can't ever forget about the human lives at stake. That has to be the driving force behind any hope for a resolution.
It feels almost impossible at times, doesn't it? Seeing a way forward, is there even a path towards a future where both sides can feel secure, can live with dignity?
It's a tough question, one that's been asked for generations. It's easy to get bogged down in the differences, the historical grievances, the endless cycle of violence. But maybe, just maybe, we need to start by recognizing our shared humanity. What if security and dignity weren't mutually exclusive? What if they were intertwined?
It's a powerful thought. And honestly, it's one we could all benefit from reflecting on. A reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope, fragile as it may be, is essential. Well, this has been a heavy one. Thank you so much for guiding us through this complex and, frankly, emotionally challenging landscape. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful, eye-opening, and maybe even a little bit unsettling. Keep asking those tough questions. Stay engaged with the world around you, and let's navigate these complicated times together.